They stood toe-to-toe with Egypt. They crowned pharaohs. They built pyramids of their own. And yet, you almost never hear their name. This is the forgotten story of the Kingdom of Kush, Egypt's powerful southern neighbor, its fiercest rival, and sometimes its ruler. How did this kingdom rise, dominate, and then disappear into the sands of time? Let's find out. When you think of ancient pyramids, golden treasures, and mighty pharaohs, you think of Egypt. The land of the Nile has become a symbol of ancient greatness. But what if I told you there was another kingdom, just south of Egypt, that built pyramids of its own, ruled Egypt for almost a century, and forged one of the most powerful empires in Africa? The Kingdom of Kush. Today we're uncovering the forgotten world of Kush, from its rise to its mysterious decline. Here's the problem. Most of us barely know anything about Kush. Egypt steals the spotlight. The pharaohs are in history books, in museums, in Hollywood movies. But Kush? It gets reduced to a footnote, if it's mentioned at all. Yet for more than 2,000 years, Kush thrived, fought, and built. So why don't we know this story? Was it erased? Was it ignored? Or was it just buried in the desert, waiting to be rediscovered? Now we go deep into the long journey of the Kingdom of Kush, step by step. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Origins in Nubia. The story begins in Nubia, a region stretching along the Nile south of Egypt, in what is today Sudan. For thousands of years, Nubia wasn't just empty desert. It was rich in gold, ivory, ebony wood, animal skins, and exotic goods. In fact, the very word Nubia is thought by some to come from Nub, the ancient Egyptian word for gold. Egypt noticed. From the earliest dynasties, Egypt looked southward, seeing Nubia as both a source of wealth and a threat. Archaeological finds show that Nubia had its own cultures long before Egypt conquered the region. These early Nubian societies lived along the riverbanks, farming, fishing, and trading with Egypt. But around 2000 BCE, something shifted. Nubian communities began to organize, unite, and rise. Out of this came the Kingdom of Kush, centered at a city called Kerma. Kerma was no small town. Archaeologists have uncovered massive mud brick structures called Dafufa, towering temples and ceremonial centers that prove Kush was building monumental architecture at the same time as Egypt. Graves in Kerma are filled with treasures, weapons, cattle, and even human sacrifices, showing just how wealthy and powerful Kushite kings were. And Egypt took notice. Chapter 2. Clash and Conquest by Egypt. For centuries, Egypt and Kush were locked in a love-hate relationship. Sometimes they traded, exchanging gold, ivory, and cattle for Egyptian grain and manufactured goods. Other times they fought. Around 1500 BCE, during the height of the Egyptian New Kingdom, pharaohs like Thutmose III and Thutmose III marched south and conquered Kush. They destroyed Kerma and set up Egyptian forts and temples all along Nubia. For the next 500 years, Kush was under Egyptian rule. Egyptian governors oversaw the region, Egyptian gods were worshipped in Kush, and the people of Nubia were drafted into the Egyptian army. The Egyptians called Nubians fierce warriors, and they were often recruited as archers. But being conquered doesn't mean Kush disappeared. The people of Kush absorbed Egyptian culture, writing, and religion, but they didn't forget their own roots. Deep down, the spirit of independence remained. Chapter 3. Kush rises again. By around 1000 BCE, Egypt began to weaken. The once great empire was splitting, with rival pharaohs ruling different parts of the land. And in this chaos, Kush seized its chance. The Kushite capital shifted to Napata, near the sacred mountain of Jebel Barkal. Egyptians believed this mountain was the home of the god Amun, and the Kushites embraced it as their spiritual heart. From Napata, the Kushite kings rose again, blending Egyptian traditions with their own Nubian identity. And then something shocking happened. The roles flipped. Kush, once ruled by Egypt, now turned north and marched into Egypt. Chapter 4. The Black Pharaohs of Egypt. The 25th dynasty. Around 750 BCE, King Pi of Kush led his army north and conquered Egypt. He didn't just raid it, he took the throne. This began what historians call the 25th dynasty, or the Kushite dynasty. For almost a century, Kushite pharaohs ruled Egypt itself. Imagine the scene: Nubian kings, dark-skinned rulers from the south, sitting on the golden throne of the pharaohs. They saw themselves as restorers of true Egyptian tradition, bringing back old temples, old rituals, and the power of the god Amun. King Pi left behind a dramatic record of his conquest, describing how he humbled Egypt's rulers and demanded their submission. His successors, Shabaka, Shabitku, and Taharka, expanded the empire, stretching from the Nile Delta deep into Nubia. Taharka, in particular, became famous. He fought against the Assyrians, the rising power in the Middle East. At one point, his empire stretched from the Mediterranean down to the African interior. For Egypt, it was a renaissance. For Kush, it was the height of glory. But empires never last forever. Chapter 5: Fall from Egypt. The Assyrians, with their iron weapons and brutal tactics, eventually struck back. By the mid-600s BCE, they drove the Kushite pharaohs out of Egypt. The Kushite kings retreated south to Nubia, back to their capital at Napata. And here's what's fascinating: instead of collapsing, Kush continued to thrive. In fact, it entered a new golden age, not in Egypt, but deeper in Africa. Chapter 6: The Golden Age of Meroe. Around 300 BCE, the Kushite capital shifted again, this time to Meroe, farther south along the Nile. And this move changed everything. Meroe was perfectly placed. It sat at the crossroads of trade routes, connecting Africa's interior to Egypt, the Red Sea, and beyond. But more than that, it had a secret weapon: iron. Archaeologists have found huge slag heaps around Meroe, evidence of massive iron smelting operations. This wasn't just a city of temples and palaces, it was an industrial powerhouse. Kushite blacksmiths made weapons, tools, and goods that fueled trade across the region. The culture of Meroe was unique. The kings and queens, often called kandaks or candaces, ruled with incredible power. In fact, Kushite queens sometimes ruled in their own right, commanding armies and negotiating with foreign powers. One famous kandake, Amanirenas, fought against the Romans after they took over Egypt. According to Roman accounts, she was fierce, one-eyed, and unafraid to defy the might of Rome. Meroe also developed its own writing system, the Meroitic script. To this day, it hasn't been fully decoded, leaving much of Kush's story locked in mystery. And let's not forget the pyramids. At Meroe, the Kushites built hundreds of pyramids, smaller and steeper than Egypt's, but still striking. Today, Sudan actually has more pyramids than Egypt. Chapter 7: Clash with Rome. When Rome conquered Egypt in 30 BCE, Kush became its new southern neighbor. And Rome soon found out that Kush was no pushover. In 25 BCE, Kandake Amanirenas led her army north and attacked Roman territory, even capturing statues of Emperor Augustus and burying them under temple steps. Rome struck back, sending legions into Nubia. The war dragged on for years until a peace treaty was signed. The Kushites actually held their ground, and the treaty gave them favorable terms, a rare thing against Rome. This moment showed the world that Kush was a power to be respected. Chapter 8: The Long Decline. Nothing lasts forever. Over the centuries, Meroe began to weaken. Trade routes shifted, desertification spread, and new powers rose around them. By the 300s CE, the Kingdom of Aksum, in modern Ethiopia, invaded and dealt a final blow to Meroe. The Kingdom of Kush faded into history. Its cities crumbled, its script was forgotten, and its pyramids were swallowed by sand. For more than 1,000 years, Kush was little more than a legend. Chapter 9: Rediscovery. In the 19th and 20th centuries, explorers and archaeologists began uncovering the ruins of Kush. They found the pyramids at Meroe, the temples at Jebel Barkal, and the treasures of Kerma. Slowly, the story of Kush came back to life. And yet, it's still a mystery. The Meroitic language remains undeciphered. Many tombs remain unexplored. And questions linger: how much did Kush influence Egypt? How far did its trade networks reach? Why did it truly fall? The greatest moment of Kushite history was the 25th dynasty, when the Black Pharaohs ruled Egypt. Imagine the reversal, a kingdom once conquered now sitting on the throne of its conqueror. It's a story of resilience, ambition, and pride. It's the high point that defined Kush's place in history. So what happened to the Kingdom of Kush? It rose from Nubia's roots, rivaled Egypt, conquered it, thrived in Meroe, defied Rome, and finally fell to shifting sands and stronger neighbors. But its legacy endures. In pyramids that still rise in Sudan, in the stories of warrior queens, and in the forgotten pages of African history. Kush wasn't just Egypt's shadow. It was a kingdom of its own, proud, powerful, and unforgettable. Don't miss the next story that history tried to hide. Hit subscribe.